This is an onion, and I eat it. And this week I decided to learn how to dice it properly and fast. So let's see how my initial dicing technique goes. That was probably very embarrassing for those of you who know how to cook, but I knew I could do much better. And after a quick search online, the first thing I discovered is that I've been using the wrong knives my entire life. That being any knife that is not a big chef knife between 8 to 10 inches long. Apparently these are used in the kitchen 90% of the time. A correct way to hold it is by placing the thumb and the index fingers at the back base of the blade, and then wrapping the other 3 fingers around the handle. As Joshua Wiseman says in this awesome guide for knife skills, it is almost like it becomes an extension of your arm. Like a sword!
Adventure awaits! Huzzah!
I'm just kidding, please don't play sword with the knife. Over time, the knife is gonna become dull just because of regular use. And using a dull knife is actually super dangerous, since it's unstable and can slip more easily. And then how are you gonna thumbs up this video? Nobody has time for losing their hand, babies. So it's super important that the knife is really sharpened. That's why I also bought a honing steel for maintenance and a whetstone for actual sharpening and refining. The honing steel doesn't actually sharpen the blade, but rather straightens it after it's been naturally bent with daily use. You should use roughly a 20-degree angle while maintaining a consistent pressure from the heel of the blade to the top of it on both sides. To maintain a sharper edge for longer, the idea is to always use it after you are done using the knife. Now the whetstone has a coarse side and a fine side. The first thing is to get it really wet. And it's also super important to be consistent with the angle and pressure applied while keeping the stone wet at all times during the sharpening. Again, the idea is to use a 20-degree angle. So let's talk about holding the onion onto the not losing your fingers department. What you're supposed to do is the claw technique, in which you shape your hand like a claw with the middle finger leading the way. With the fingers bending sideways, the blade won't touch them. The blade should also not go higher than the front knuckle. And the thumb should remain inside the claw to avoid injury, as it can relax and slip out of it. And that's a big no-no. This type of chopping I'm doing, by the way, is called tapping. It's a simple straight up and down movement. Another type I practiced was rock chopping. The movement goes from the top of the blade followed by the heel. The key here is to let the weight of the knife give a flow to the entire movement. And finally, the cross chopping is done by simply placing your hand on the back of the blade and going up and down with the heel of the blade. This is by far the safer of the three and an awesome way to refine the dicing. And speaking of dicing onions, let's talk about the traditional way of doing it. The trick to cutting onions without crying is not forming an emotional bond. So these subjects shall remain nameless. First, you slice the onion into 2 halves. You leave the root for now, as cutting it off can make you both cry faster. Then with the knife towards the root, you give these long, lengthwise, vertical strokes, trying to get as close to the root as possible, but not quite there. Then 1 or 2 horizontal lengthwise slices. Always with the claw technique, you hold it together in place while you do the vertical rock chopping motion. When you get closer to the root and the onion becomes unstable to handle, you just bend it over and continue the rock chopping. I decided to practice that carefully before going in for speed, as I wanted to understand the process behind it really well. So for days, all I did was that. Cutting half with the root on, slices towards the root, 2 horizontal slices, and the final chop. Again. And again. Remember the claw? Be careful with the thumb. And again. All this practice gave me some super basic knife experience and enough muscle memory to start working on speed. Now, a secret for a quick onion chopping is getting rid of intermediate steps. Most street artists will use the top of the blade to stop the cut before it goes through. They also skip the horizontal slices. They simply do the tap chopping vertically, forming a crisscross shape and then dicing it. My goal was to use this technique to chop the onion into medium dices under 20 seconds. So first, I practiced the steps in a super slow motion manner. But on my first tries, I always forgot something. First, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to slice the onion into 2 halves before chopping it into dices. And then I was forgetting to use the top of the blade to stop the vertical slices halfway, and so the pieces ended up being too big. The dicing itself was happening fast enough, but there was no finesse to it whatsoever. So I kept practicing, and I even cut myself a little bit. And after a couple of days of refining the technique and deciding I wasn't going to split the onion to save time, this is what ended up happening.
This was good.
14.
This is by far one of my favorite skills until now because there's so much to do with it. It's so useful. If you have a suggestion of what I can cook with this many onions, please leave a comment below. And hey, in this channel I learn a new and different skill every week, so please hit the like button and subscribe for more. You can also find me on Instagram. Bye bye! Another thing that this video taught me is to stop biting my fingernails, man. Those look disgusting close-ups.